Hi, everyone. It's still in Taggart. I'm here with Kamal Pradhan. He is a HR thought leader who's worked in a number of industries, entertainment, oil and gas, mining, and it's currently HR technology and HR ops at Signify Health. Kamal is a big fan of how technology works and can impact the employee experience. And he's one of the few people who knows how to connect the dots between HR technology and employee experience. Kamal, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the 360 Insights HR Tech Chat.
Thank you, Dylan, for having me. And I have to say, the work that you and the 360 Insights group are doing, is fabulous. We need that kind of insights for this industry, especially in the HR and technology space. And really excited to be here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having giving us the pleasure to have you on here. And diving right into it, I think one thing you and I both kind of look at is kind of how technology impacts the employee experience and how things like data governance and the employee experience and payroll all kind of tie into that in their own way. You've said in previous conversations we've had that HR is becoming a lot more than just keeping the lights on. Um, from an employee perspective, you need to build that trust from day one, and it's more, but from a large perspective of a larger organization, it goes kind of beyond that. It goes into how that trust leads to retention, leads to better performance, and I've heard you say that what whatever you can do to step up your game as an organization is kind of the new normal. It's not just doing the basic functions of keeping lights on. Um, it's more than that. Do you mind telling people a little bit about your thoughts on that and how you came to that conclusion?
Sure, Dylan. It's an interesting one, right? Because let's take an analogy. You know, you want to go to your favorite restaurant, right? But let's take even a step back. Why is it your favorite restaurant? Maybe it's just because of the food or the way you feel when you're dining there, the way the experiences from the time you get in, uh, you know, the way you're being welcomed, the way you're being served, and the way you're able to really have a refreshing moment, in that space, right? So a number of factors play into that. And you can't just say, well, the server was great, and then that's why it's my favorite, or just the food was great. And, it's a combination of different factor. And why is it so different in the place that you work, right? It's that can you really function in a way where you can get your work done in a very positive space, and at the same time, once you know, are off work, you're not thinking about it anymore, and you have the liberty to do that, right? Completely plug off. And all of these things matter quite a bit, especially when it comes to workplace, and and you want to also be able to tell your friends and family to say, yeah, I work at a place where, I have a um, team of good leaders and where I have a path to growth. I know exactly, the basics of what I get paid, where I stand, how the benefits are. I don't even have to worry about all those things because they are work seamlessly. But what really excites me is that, 2 years from now, I have so many options and there's a path. The company's really invested in me, and the leaders and HR functions come together to create that, right? So it's ultimately the employee experience that matters, you know? And based on that narrative, I am actually bringing other talent that I know, right? I'm being the ambassador. And how do you create that? Is through the experience, and the experience is enabled by the technology, and all bringing all of those together, the HR function, you know, with different parts within, I would say, recruiting and talent and learning, you know, and the HR tech coming together is what makes it a challenging case on why you should invest in this kind of ecosystem, right? So I'm very passionate about this. I can go on for hours, but let me just pause right here, and kind of share the mic back to you.
No problem. And if you go for, the 30 minutes, that's all good. That's why we're here. So, but yeah, kind of circling back to that principal concept of stepping up the game. You've this kind of concept of empathy that I've heard you mention in the past, empathy that goes with action, which I think is one of the most memorable things, in our previous conversations that you've said. You know, one thing that really stuck with me from the first time we talked was you said that the companies that kind of thrive in the next 10 to 20 years are going to be the ones that take the best care of their employees, which I thought was kind of surprising because for a long time that really hasn't felt like it was the case. It felt like the move fast and break things was kind of like the trend of the pre-COVID 21st century. It felt like the disruptor kind of methodology, kind of way of thinking, which I think is still important, but you can't do that at the sacrifice of your employees, where they feel like you're not really looking after them and they feel like they're just part of that destructive moving fast and breaking things process, where they also kind of can be disposed to the wayside. Do you still feel like going forward do you feel like going forward companies are starting to take that to heart, or are you seeing a change in the way companies are managing and their people or leading their people?
I can't really speak, because I think there are companies who do that really well, and there are companies who are in that path. And there are companies that are struggling, right? And I think there's a combination of the right strategy and bringing the right folks from HR, business, and how do we make that happen? Um, it is something I firmly believe in. That organizations should be able to focus on if they do want that projectile growth, right? I'll take companies like Netflix and Nvidia. We've got success stories that really stem from HR and people and culture, right? So overall, I truly believe that we have some good examples where they've done that. But let me define what I mean by empathy with action, right? So you have, a people leader that you report to, and there's that human experience, that day to day, where you know if you have something concrete that let's say you want to get a certification or you want to go to a next role, you want that help from the leadership, right? That people leader alone isn't responsible. It's a 50-50 between you and that person. But at the same time, is the organization really setting up? We've had the 5,000 plus dollars of tuition reimbursement for a number of years, but there are concepts of student debt repayment and things like that, right? How are we making all of those things work to enable that leader and the employee, right, to make that happen? So now the leader is not just empathizing with you, saying, well, I really hear you. I hear that you want to grow, and here's the path. Or I hear that you have a lot of debt, in terms of student loans and things like that. Our company has really good program, here's what you can use, right? So there's action with empathy. Another one I can give you an example is, HR function, right? We're always saying, oh, we want to make sure people are getting paid right. Great. Okay, we did it. What's next? Are we just going to continue to keep that? Yes, that is a given. How do you step up and how do you empathize more? Is that there's always this, ongoing thing. Let's use an example of payday loans, right? People have to wait 2 weeks, a month, or depending on what the a company has really set up in terms of the pay frequency, right? Now, if you're a low income family, and you're waiting 2 more weeks and you need that groceries to be bought, today, tomorrow, right? You're going to a payday loan and kind of doing everything you have to make ends meet, right? So there's a concept of earn ways access. A lot of states are kind of adopting that. And you work with your payroll vendor and this third party, like I'll use examples like, Daily Pay, and there are multiple, who do that. What it basically does is it enables that pay to be accessible for the employee early on. You don't have to wait till that paycheck date, right? So now you've done something, more than just empathize with their workforce. You've actually enabled them to have access to their wages faster. And that actually prevents them from having to go get into these high interest loans, right? And these are the things I'm talking about, right? Being a thought leader is great. Okay, you have great thoughts, but how do you make that work? And I think that passion comes from, for me personally, is I actually am on the field doing that. And then I want to kind of share more of this for, employers, HR functions, and then really elevate the role of HR technology that touches payroll, benefits, all that, and bring this new normal that you talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were saying that to think about how kind of far we've come in terms of the way even just pay and the employee has changed, like the relationship between pay and the employee, where companies still do and previously have pay, biweekly. It's pretty common. But for a lot of workers who don't, let's say, don't make six figures or even don't even make, 50,000 plus a year, their pay is become the need for their pay has become a lot more immediate. I think that's just seems to be the trend. Like you work, you get the money right away. You work, you get the money right away. It's interesting that like and it's only through technology that really you could do that. Obviously in other industries, if you're working construction or something, at the end of the day, you get paid out cash or
Exactly.
other jobs. But even for more corporate, businesses that are more have a more like traditional corporate structure, you're seeing people maybe in more entry level or part-time capacities being able to access their money right away, which is an interesting change that maybe was coming on the horizon, but the demand for it seems to be bigger than I think most people probably envisioned. And do you think that's going to be something we start to see more of? Do you think that it's reached its growth potential, or do you think it's going to start spreading into other industries where people are going to want their pay like right now? I don't want to wait the 2 weeks. Like you have to have the on-demand thing to avoid the payday loans that you mentioned, but also just as the economy changes and as people's spending, I guess, spending habits change, is it gonna do you think there's ever gonna be a future where the new normal is on-demand pay? Or are we still gonna stick to that kind of benchmark of every two
Yeah.
weeks?
No, that's an interesting question, Dylan. I think that I definitely see that we are moving in that direction, right? Um, it's just, access to information is so easy these days, right? And it takes one state to implement that and one organization. And the vendors who really are proponent of EWA's earned wage access, are definitely doing that. I think it's going to take some time to really kind of get that message, because everything, like anything that's new definitely takes a little longer. But with the technology moving tenfolds, right? um, yeah, I would really say that that's the direction we're headed. If we think about frontline workers, right? Because we talk about inflation quite a bit, and we're dealing with a lot right now. And in a whole, it is you can't just think of a pay as one separate element, right? It's a whole compensation package where you are provided benefits, you know, you're provided tuition reimbursement, you're provided um, bonuses in some cases, there's employee stock purchase plans, and then the operation piece that you and I talked about is having access to that sooner. So it really depends on I think it's really between the employers and these vendors to really bring it up there. I think from an employee perspective, unless you're part of that great organization where it's already been implemented, you can probably share that. So I think it's going to take a little bit longer, but I just feel, to say it in one sentence, it's just a matter of time.
Interesting. And I think, talking about digital transformations kind of as a whole, and kind of organizations that are investing in new technology, causing a digital transformation within their organization, people still want to be paid on time and accurately while that's happening.
Exactly.
And I think, and you've made the point previously where, the ecosystem is not just the platform, it's kind of the end-to-end experience. And could you talk a little bit about that and how, companies maybe investing in technology should maybe pull back a bit and realize that this one product isn't going to solve all their problems. It's bigger than that. And if you think that, and if you think that way, you're probably already behind the competition in a way. Do you mind talking on how companies that uh, take the approach where it's more of the end-to-end, more of the end-to-end, and great user experience and integrations with other technology, and how that leads to a better outcome, or can lead to a better outcome?
Sure, sure. That's a great question, Dylan. And we use transformation so loosely these days, right? Digital transformation. And, what does that truly mean? Like, um, it's subjective, with different, depending on different industries. But um, a lot of times I see the buy model, right? You buy a great product and, you know, you hope and expect that this product's going to fix all of our problems, from the retention to talent to forecasting, whatnot, right? So when I say transformation, especially, let me go even further, digital HR transformation, it truly means that technology or product is just one part of it. I'm talking about an end to end, from the time we decide, oh, you know what, you've let's talk about shared services function like finance, IT, HR. We want to add 10 more headcounts. Based on um, the cash flow and the P&L, finance and FP&A team will say, you know what, you've got budget for these 10 headcounts, right? And based on that number, the hiring manager and recruiting team and HR come together and say, okay, let's go out there and recruit, you know, and you start. So I'm just talking about the back-end processes, right? So you start putting the requisition out there. There's a range that you have to get these people under. And then there's, once you find the right candidates, you go through the offer process, you try to get them in the mid-range. Obviously, no one wants to overspend, right? And once you go through that whole offer letter and background, and this person starts, you've done one part of it, right? So your projection of what you could hire, you might have been in that range. So if you spend X dollars to hire, these number of employees, and once they start, um, there's an ongoing payroll cost, and there might be other expenses there, and there's benefit expenses, right? All that costing, from a payroll system, once you hire them, flows into GL, and then finally hits you know, um, the finance systems for forecast and planning to say, yep, this is where we are. This is a very simple scenario, right? From a back end to say, we are kind of operating, here's our dollars for our talent. And for all of that to work, you need an enterprise resource system that is very robust, that talks to each other, within the technology side, and also enables the folks within those functions to be able to go through that workflow, right? So there's that piece when it comes to transformations. That tool has to be there. There needs to be synergies. There needs to be workflow between these different functions, and the different handover, right? From HR to IT to payroll, and finance, right? And then the other side of this is, while all of this is happening, like think of a cruise ship, where everyone in the crew is the deck is working, behind the scenes, and then you have the employees who on board, right? So I'm not saying they're here to chill, like in a cruise ship, but the first few weeks they want to have that optimal experience, right? And obviously not just for the first few weeks, but ongoing. But those few weeks are critical, right? A lot of the turnover you see is within the 30 to 60 to 90 days. That's where the highest turnover happens. And so let me use myself as a candidate. I applied to a job. It was instant. I could do it within 2 minutes using my phone, and it only asked me things that are relevant to me, right? So there's a thoughtful process that the recruiting HR team and HR function have done using the technology to enable that optimal candidate experience, right? I just applied within 2 minutes and done. It went through the process flow, and the recruiter has reviewed everything. The system enables the recruiter to say, all right, I'm going to send him to the hiring manager and a few other interviewers, and they go through the interview process, right? And there's a scoring system. So it's all done optimally. And the candidate is saying, okay, my first touch point was the application portal, right? The ATS. And the second touch point was a human experience, right? I had to just interview with two people, and then I knew exactly where I was, in that workflow as a candidate. And then the next one is the final interview, and I'm done, right? And I get an offer letter. I sign using a DocuSign. Let's just use example. It was seamless. And then once I accepted the offer, I went through a bunch of pre-boarding and onboarding activity, which was like, it took me, maybe let's just make it between 30 minutes to an hour to go through all of that. I-9, checking all the boxes. For me, that was very seamless. I didn't have to really go out of my comfort zone, right? And the way I use LinkedIn, that was similar, where I could tell this company is really up, ahead and on par in the digital, I would say, ecosystem, right? And then my first day, maybe I have a buddy, right, that the company has, where I could ask a lot of questions besides the system side of things. And I'm learning about the company more. I'm learning about the job more, right? That kind of setup is an onboarding tool and a learning tool that provides, where it gives you a company overview, maybe a personalized video from your CEO or your senior leadership team. And then once I start, within the 2 weeks, I enroll in my benefits, very seamless experience. I get paid, if I started midweek, I still got paid for those 3 days, right? It really gave me that experience. And then I was able to get my devices on time, and I was able to get my work started and learn about that within the first few days. Now the productivity went up, right? Because I'm not focused on, I don't know where I get my pay or when I get my pay. All of that has been taken care, because that transformation work has been so well taught and been implemented in that way, focusing on the back end and the front end, right? That enables the functions like HR to work well, and then provides that optimal employee experience for the employee. That's what transformation is about, And then further down the road, 90 days, there's a check-in, right? So we're not saying technology should replace everything. We're saying that it is an enabler. And now we're really enabling the HR functions and the leadership to have the growth and productivity conversations, rather than focusing on, did you put your time in, did you approve it, just a lot of those I would say monotonous, and practical things and transaction things can be automated, right? So um, that's in a nutshell for me, transformation is all about uh, the growth of the company while not neglecting the growth of the employees and the talent, right? So it's a win-win for both. So let me pause here. I always say that this is a topic I can go for hours and hours, but yeah, that's where we are today, and then AI will definitely enable that. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of going into that ecosystem a bit further, specifically for a group of individuals or a group of workers that we both find interesting, which is, you know, frontline workers with like atypical or deskless environments. I know you've done some really interesting work in those industries. Um, you have to assume that they're not in front of a computer a good amount of their time. So how does that change the way you approach this? Because it is, and sometimes it's not a one size fits all solution for every company, but especially in these industries. And I know you've, in mining and some of the other industries you've worked in, how did you kind of deal with those challenges tying into what you just mentioned?
I think the fundamental thing there is the business acumen. Do you really understand the business, right? Even if you're HR, even if you're HR tech, or that is the key thing. So I'll give you a very specific example. So the mining company I used to work for had a key problem for frontline workers and even actually our desk population, right? Um, and let me define the problem. So there were a lot of grievances that came in from the union where the miners, as they went down to the mine and did their work, clocked in and clocked out, during the pay, they would say, you know what, actually, I was there at 8 a.m. and I clocked out at, 5 p.m. With my lunch break, I still feel like the pay isn't accurate, right? And so we had to really investigate, is it like obviously there's some truth to it, but what went wrong, right? So normally you sit at a desk, you talk to the HR business partners and folks at the site. But in this case, actually I went down there, and met with the HR business partners, and then obviously, they gave us a tour, and it was not like, oh, it was a fun, exciting tour. It was, but it was also really to understand exactly what do they go through in a daily cycle, right? So folks who would implement it, in the beginning didn't really, not every implementation goes 100%, right? So when I was going through that process, there's a safety training you have to go through, and then you gear up, you take the elevator like it's a mile deep, right? And it's a different world down there in the mine, and this, I'm talking about a salt mine, right? Not a coal mine. And as you're going through all these processes, when you clock in, there are some times where things could go wrong, the elevator is stuck, or anything can happen, right? At the production plant. And so your clock in time doesn't really reflect the true time. There's always this extra few minutes or sometimes 10 to 15 that is unaccounted for. But the employee is there, right? And what we were able to do is get a buy-in from the leadership, work with the union and say, look, we totally get it. There is a buffer time, that we have to put in. And with that alignment, we kind of said, as long as you log in, let's just say you logged in at 10:15, we'll round back to 10 a.m. Right? So I'm just using that hypothetically, but that's what we did, so that now we started that grievances and the issues log went down quite a bit, and the employees were happier, right? Because that 15 minutes add up, a day, a week, a month, So that was one. And then same thing for our desk population, right? Especially who are hourly folks. They'd say, yeah, I would log in, but the computer didn't start. So we couldn't, they didn't have as many issues as our frontline folks at the mine did, but we still had to do some kind of rounding rule, right? So there's a very specific tactical example that we solved through technology and alignment with the business, but we had to know exactly what was going on. So great, you're a thought leader, but thought leadership is not going to do, everything, right? You still have to be able to execute on those. So this is a great example where, I think that we play, it's not just keeping the lights on, keeping the right lights on, for the right time. Um, so yeah, this is one of the examples that Dylan and I have.
And understanding the business seems to be kind of a critical part of it. And I think that, given that, very unique example of you know, you understood the business enough to go there in person and respected it enough to go there in person to really witness how it works for someone actually doing the job, which I feel like is, if you're trying to do all the things you mentioned before, like have empathy and kind of meet the workers where they're at, then you literally need to go and meet them where they're at sometimes. And I think that that part of it is can be missed on some people. And tying that into technology, you know, making sure things are mobile based and practical, I feel like is something that I've thought a lot about, having talked to other thought leaders in the industry, and also done some of these jobs myself when I was younger. Is sometimes the technology just really doesn't apply nicely into the industry, and it takes someone like yourself going down there, or someone with the experience, um firsthand, to go down there and kind of tweak it all so it does actually interact, because it is just the middleman. So it's like it should interact with the employee well, and it should interact with the organization well, so both are kind of happy. um do you feel like a lot of are there any specific solutions you feel like are really nailing that and kind of creating a ecosystem for frontline workers that doesn't really waste their time and lets them focus on their job?
Honestly, like this is a question I don't have a very clean answer, right? Because there are good technologies like so in this particular example, right, the miners who were going in, they had a badge, and the badge swipe was using a we used Kronos, which is ultimate group right now, UKG and all combined. So basically the clock is there and you just swipe your badge, and then it you know um, inputs your time, and uh, there are really good tools and products out there, right? It really depends on how you implement it, you know? And I really think that it's more than the product, it's the implementation, and the implementation that's built around the business needs and not a very standard vanilla one, right? So, yeah, Workday is a good product, Oracle's a good product too, but not everything's going to be one size fits all, right? You may have I want to say, um, we use Greenhouse as a ATS. I've used that. I've used Taleo, you know, um, for attracting the newer talent and the younger talent, right? And not like every age range, but especially like the tech savvy one, they will prefer the quickest way to get on, the fastest way, right? So there are some products on the ATS side that have done a great job and some are lagging behind, right? But I think that if you have a big ERP, product like Oracle, it's good for, a mid-sized to bigger company. For a small company, you just have to think, is it the right one for us, right? And you could probably go with HiBop, or you could go with, Ultimate software, right? So I think that it really depends on the business, and how we implement it.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of talking about like you kind of touched on like onboarding, which to me is kind of where retention begins. You know, I think I've heard you talk about talent mapping early on and focusing on kind of promotion ladders. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
So there's this window of opportunity for every organization when we hire people. No one has a crystal ball, right? But if you have enough data, you're kind of closer, you know? So what do I mean by that? So you're hiring a group of talent for different roles, you know. Um, During that process, you gather what their academics is, what their skill sets are, you know, all the different things. You have an opportunity to get that in, right? During the initial application and then during the onboarding piece. And then during the first 30 days or 60 days, 9 days, you can kind of time it. You have a way to get feedback from them, right? To say how was their onboarding experience? What did they like about it? You know, did they have the right human experience? Did they have the right system experience, right? You know, and are they, you know, did they feel welcome, right? So there's all these combination that you can get through data, capture it, and from here, let's focus on talent because that's where what you asked me, right? You can kind of see what their aspirations are too. 2 years from now, I came as an intern in an engineering role. I truly want to become a product manager. So they're already telling you what they where they want to be, right? And you have a way, you, when I say you as a HR function within and the talent function, to say, we're actually going to need 2 or 3 more product managers, you know, um, within a 2 year roadmap. And you have a talent pool who've kind of you've hired because of what their qualifications are, and then you also have a way to build that, right? So having all these data points and say, all right, here's a roadmap. You enable the leadership to say, look, you always have the option to hire externally, but hiring internal is great because you know that enables your traditional, or what say, knowledge, you know, I would even say tribal knowledge within your company to stay within the company, right? And um, so tell us what you need, you know. You can ask the hiring managers and people leaders of these employees to say, this is what you need, this is what we're going to give you, and have that dialogue, right? And then work with that employee to say, 6 months from now, here's a development plan. As you continue to work, here's a certification you could take. We're going to provide you that. A year from now, you know, so these are the X, Y, and Z, like a step, you know, career ladder and mapping, and then also the compensation that aligns with that, you know, and you don't have to pay top dollar to again recruit. That's extra dollars spent, right? You know, that can be avoided. So I think those are the things you can do, and that window of opportunity is within the first 30 to 90 days to really make them feel welcome, at the same time get that info from them. And so this is what I'm talking about from an onboarding and, you know, experience and developing talent.
Thing. Well, listen, Kamal, thank you. It's been a great talk today, and I really appreciate you coming on. I know you could go on for quite a while on some of these subjects, so I appreciate you being able to explain it so succinctly. It's you know, these are very in-depth subjects, but you all you know, the way you talk about them all really helps it come off very clearly, which is great to hear. Um, just before we wrap things up, is there anywhere people can reach out to you if they have any questions? I know you're kind of active on LinkedIn.
Yes, LinkedIn is the best place. You can just search for Kamal Pradhan, you know, and you'll see me. And, you know, I'm happy to engage in conversations and provide any help. Ultimately, what I would say is, you know, everything that we do is to make world a better place, right? Make our community a better place, make our workplace a better place. And we are doing our part through HR technology and operations and HR together. And that's the goal, right? Having the best shiny technology is not the goal. It's an enabler. So that's the message that I would want to leave. And, you know, Dylan, I also want to thank you for doing all the excellent work that you and Nick and others are doing, and, you know, providing a 360 experience. And I love the name 360 Insights, right? Is we need that from a vendor solution perspective, from a career mapping perspective, every single aspect that touches HR and workforce management, right? You and the team have been doing that, and I just want to say thank you for that.
I really appreciate it. And thank you again so much for coming on, and look forward to having you back on in the future.
Pleasure being here. Take care. Bye bye.
All right, bye everyone.